I found out about Yanis recently, and he speaks about how capitalism has ended and technofeudalism is now a thing, taking over. So let's hear what he has to say. This is called The Next Stage of Capitalism. Yanis Varoufakis, he's Greek, on technofeudalism and the fall of democracy. This is from the Institute of Art and Ideas. Let's go. Let's hear it if you want to learn.
Every time we move around with our phone that has Google Maps on it, Google Maps knows where we are. That increases the command capital of Google. They have the power to make you and I, unwaged, without even realizing that we're working for them, produce part of their command capital.
Sure, yeah. Let's hear it.
These are pretty bleak days. I was very much looking forward to sharing with you my latest fixation. When I say latest, over the last 2 or 3 years, I have this fixation that we no longer live under something that can be defined properly as capitalism. Look, wherever we turn, we see capital. Capital making gains over labor, over society, over our democracies. And here I am with an outrageous thesis that capitalism is on the way out. Now,
it's a tough one.
Where am I coming from? Let's begin with capital, shall we? Now, what's capital? It's not money. It's not a kind of divinity. It's something very tangible. Economists, and I used to be an economist up until fairly recently, we define capital as goods that have been produced for the purposes of assisting in the production of other goods. In other words, produced means of production. That was what capital was. Robinson Crusoe's salvaged fishing gear, in fiction, a farmer's plow, back in ancient times, in feudal times today, a smith's furnace or hammer. These are manufactured goods that help produce a larger catch of fish, more food, shiny, steely tools. This is what capital has always been. Capital, of course, preceded capitalism. Capitalism is a system, a mode of production and distribution of goods and services, in which the power to compel others to do things is vested in those who have ownership over capital goods. In the previous mode of production, under feudalism, power sprang out of ownership of land. With the transition, the great transformation from feudalism to capitalism, increasingly power shifted from those who had land to those who owned capital goods. Capitalism vested the owners of capital with two new powers. The first power was to compel those who did not have capital to work for them. That's the whole point of being a capitalist. Your ownership of capital goods means that you have the power, the bargaining power over people who do not own capital goods, the only capital that they have to offer is their own human labor, to work for you. The second power, of course, is the power of the capitalist class, of those who own the majority of capital goods, to set the agenda, and to set the agenda in the various fora where big, important decisions are taken on behalf of everyone. In the past, under feudalism, it was the landowners that had the power to set the agenda. My hypothesis, which I want to share with you and to try to explain and to convince you about, is that we now have a new form of capital. When I say now, I mean the last 10, 15 years or so. A new form of capital, I shall be arguing, is emerging. And as it does, as it emerges, as it does so, it is forging a new ruling class, a spanking new ruling class, even a new mode of production. There's a second power that command capital grants its owners, whom I call cloudalists.
Cloudalists.
The same algorithms that guide our purchases also have the capacity surreptitiously to command us, the users, directly to produce new command capital for the cloudalists. I need to stress the importance of this.
I need to hear this, yeah.
Under capitalism, the only way capital could be generated, could be produced, was when a capitalist had workers working for her or him, usually him, through the production of surplus value. An amount of that surplus value was reinvested into capital goods.
Sure.
So the only way capital could breed was through the labor market, through the labor process, through the manufacturing that was taking place using waged labor at the factory, in the office, in the supermarket.
Okay.
But what I'm saying here is that the cloudalists have a power that no capitalist ever had. They have the power to make you and I, unwaged, without even realizing that we were working for them, produce part of their command capital.
But the thing is here, we're working for free. That's absolutely correct. You can't really argue against that. But are we not receiving something in return? Is that not the agreement here? Well, unsaid, or well, unless you read the terms of service in some sense or whatever. But going to Google or using Google Maps, you are getting a service for this while you add to its algorithm or its machine learning or whatever they got. Is that not, this is where I don't understand it, so let's hear some more.
Every time we move around with our phone that has Google Maps on it, Google Maps knows where we are. That increases the command capital of Google. So we are contributing directly capital, not through some kind of market, without us being waged or part of the labor process at all. This is a new power that capitalists never had. While all this is taking place, has been taking place now for a good 15 years at least, capitalism itself as a socio-economic system that went through various transformations and metamorphoses. After the Second World War, it became a planned system with Bretton Woods, with huge constraints, very nice constraints on the bankers, on the financiers. Remember, we had capital controls for 20, 25 years. People, you couldn't move millions or trillions or billions between countries just by pressing a button.
Yes.
So then we had financialization and neoliberalism and globalization. And then we had the massive crisis, the nemesis that followed the hubris of financialization and globalization in 2008. All the banks went belly up in 2008. In April 2009, under Gordon Brown, who was then Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, there was a meeting of the G7, the G10, the G20 in London. They coordinated the printing presses of the various central banks, from the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, the European Central Bank, the Bank of Sweden, the Bank of Switzerland, the Bank of Japan, and so on. They printed a lot of money and they refloated finance. But in so doing, given that the other side of the same coin was austerity for the vast majority of people in the world, you had a combination of austerity for the many and socialism for the bankers with printed money. I don't want to focus on whether this was fair, unfair, it boosted inequality. Of course, it was unfair, and of course, it boosted inequality. But it did something far more significant from the perspective of the lecture that I am delivering tonight. It replaced the role of profits in capitalism with central bank money.
Oh,
now, as I said before, capitalism has undergone a variety of metamorphoses since its inception in late 18th century in England, Scotland, Wales, and Amsterdam. But all those varieties of capitalism had one thing in common. One thing in common. Actually, two. They had two pillars. All these capitalisms were based on two pillars. One was that the engine that drove them was private profit. Capital accumulation market called it private profit. The second one was that all the exploitation, all the money making, all the value creation, exchange value creation was happening through markets, labor markets, product markets, energy markets, futures markets, financial markets. Markets, profits, the two pillars of capitalism. Well, my thesis, or part of my thesis, is that from 2009 onwards, the role that profits used to play in fueling the engine that pulled capitalism ahead was profits were replaced by central bank money. And you can see that most of the most important companies over the last 10, 15 years don't really make profits. If you look at...
Oh, it's the same like Uber. Uber had been running for so long at a deficit, right? But just to gain market share. I guess if that's what he means.
Uber, Airbnb, Netflix,
Well, he mentioned
Spotify,
Uber, so.
Tesla, very little profits, if any. What drives them is a stock exchange where their shares are going through the roof. And why are the shares going through the roof? Because central banks have been printing the money to make sure that the financial markets remain in rude health.
Yeah, that's why it's been a pretty good idea to invest in something like the S&P 500 or whatever for so long, right? This money just gets printed out of us, but it's just it's another emphasis on inequality in the end, because the money's just becoming so devalued in some sense when you're just printing it and it has no attachment to gold or anything else. You know, I'm not an economist, so you can think for yourself a bit, but in some sense, this is a major issue where it's just this inflation of uh, of our idea of what something is worth through a stock market or something, right? It's just not really, they just don't go together really well at this point. It all feels like you just need to pop a balloon and it all falls apart, right? That's what it feels like a bit.
The second pillar, markets, they are on the way out, and I've already explained why. Because command capital has risen to such an extent that not only does it tell us what we want, but it also creates the platforms on which we can actually buy that which they tell us that we want. And remember, these are not markets, they're platforms. The moment you enter Amazon.com, you have exited capitalism.
Interesting.
In the same way that the moment you walk into the Google campus in California, you exit capitalism because you enter a centrally planned organization with a complete hierarchy. There's no market in Google. In the same way, there is no market in General Motors. There is no market in Volkswagen. The moment you enter the factory, there's no market there. It's like, a Stalinist organization.
But would it be no different than entering a shop in some sense? I mean, okay, that was a bit of a dumb comment. I get the scale of Google. I get it. And I get that you're entering a system in and of itself, which runs on its own way in some sense. And they're so big to the point where finding competition for these things are not at the level of human beings anymore, if you could say it like that. Like you could have a shoe store and down the street is another shoe store. Okay, those are markets. You have a street with markets and they're all competing in some way and you have a choice and blah, blah. And Amazon features its own market in there, but everyone's selling stuff from China, by the way, but whatever. And then, but in general, Amazon in and of itself sets its own rules and its own systems. Let's digest some more.
Maybe it's quite pleasant, but it's still a hierarchical, top-down, non-market organization. The moment you enter Amazon.com, remember, there is one person that owns the algorithm that determines, once you are in Amazon.com, what you see, what you can buy, what you can't buy, what you can't see. Some people see one thing, other people see another thing. It's this algorithm that determines that. This is not...
Oh yeah, I have to remember that whatever's sold on, that was an ugly snapshot of him, whatever's sold on Amazon.com, I guess what is sold is a bit irrelevant, but rather whatever Amazon makes from it, whether it's from fees or whatever it is then the system of Amazon, right? In which everyone needs to play the game. But would a market not consist of eBay, for example? Also not on the same scale at all? But I guess I'm trying to understand, aren't there still competing markets in some sense? Or, yeah. Man, do you guys know about technofeudalism or the idea of it from Yanis? Because if you do, try to help me understand, because I'm trying to understand how we're exiting capitalism, or his argument is we've basically exited it and we're entering technofeudalism. I get it though. Maybe we're just not there yet, and that's why I have arguments against it, but we are going to get into it to the point where you just really don't have much choice but to enter one market, which is run by like one massive... This is like a bit like cyberpunk,
Okay, this is like a feudal estate
Right, right. We all need to go back to flip phones. That's the problem.
A fiefdom, only it's a digital one, a digital fiefdom. So if you take seriously my hypothesis so far, what we have is a new kind of capital, which I call command capital, that
That makes sense.
has
The word.
given rise to a new ruling class, the Cloudalists, with traditional capitalists becoming subsumed, becoming a vassal class vis-a-vis the Cloudalists. You have the replacement of profit making with central bank money, which creates new ways of telling people what to do. Because if you are Elon Musk, for instance, your capacity to make the world go round draws from the value of your shares, of the shares of Tesla, of SpaceX, and so on. And those values are not that much related to profit at all. They're related to the state money that central banks are printing, as well as to the command capital of companies that can, through, even when you buy a Tesla, it is command capital that directs the car. You know that when you buy a car like a Tesla, like a Volkswagen or Fold or, a Jaguar, the company can just press a button and switch off your car or stop updating it. And that's it. Your car is kaput very soon after.
Yeah, this is one thing I also hate about this type of stuff. Like, I'm serious, man. We all need to go back to flip phones, where you have more control over what you own in some sense. That's one thing that I definitely am against. This idea that you buy a car, whatever, current updated technology, and some form of command center, as he describes, has control over it, or could have. And some of them say they don't. No, we don't. I say, yeah, it's bullshit, man. Come on.
So capital may indeed be everywhere. And it is clearly on a rampage. It is on a triumphant march, flattening democracies, flattening social capital, flattening labor, creating an ever-burgeoning precariat, a vassal capitalist class. But capitalism, as we understood it so far, is on the way as a result of this new form of command capital that is giving rise to a new ruling class. There is no contradiction here. Just a sign of a new form of capital that dispenses with markets and whose reproduction, the production of command capital, is guaranteed by state money, not private profit.
Interesting. By state money, not private profits. Let's hear what people have to say. Because this is a very interesting topic to me that I want to learn more about. So if you know, let me know in the comments how stupid I am, please. I get the feeling that Western oligarchs have decided that democratic systems are too limiting for their businesses and plutocracy is much more profitable. Well. When I was 20 years old, I never got why older people around... Man, these are also pessimistic about the future. Now I am 35 and seeing how fascism and digital dictators are being welcomed with open hands by so many people makes me understand. I'm very pessimistic about the future now. I actually want to learn about this. Let's hear this. I truly wish that I kept my head in the sand. The more I understand, the more afraid I am. God damn. Okay, here. I've only just learned about Yanis Varoufakis' work and I've been blown away. The framework truly demystifies our outrageous socio-political realities. Focusing merely on fascism, capitalism, colonialism feels like band-aid solutions, and I felt like I was still missing the big picture for so long. Thankful for this. How ironic is to get an American ad at the same time as talking about Amazon's fiefdom. That's hilarious. I love Yanis. He puts into words what I've been noticing and feeling in my bones for the last 10 years. Let's go. Understanding the misery of our existence does not help with implementing more... Oh, man. Man, you know what? I feel like everyone's still trying to digest what it is he's trying to say. And it's not, I mean, I get it. I get it. This command center stuff, command capital, makes a lot of sense. It does. I just wonder if we're on the transition to complete command capital, where we still have some choice to leave some of these systems, but not that much, right? And at some point, will it even be possible if you want to engage with the world in some sense? But he also explains how the capital is directed from government rather than private. And that I would want more explanation on. I need to watch more about this guy. Do you guys know? Let me know, please, because this thing is interesting and I want to learn more about it. So help a brother out.